Good morning, soccer community. I am Roberto Silva, Executive Director and founder of the Striker Texas. We're very pleased to be hosting for the second year in a row the Texas Soccer Summit. And what a way to start our second and last day of the summit this year with an amazing panel with two big superstars of the soccer community, two supporters of the soccer community. But before that, don't forget, we can only do this with your support. So subscribe to the Striker Texas. We got the 30-day free trial. Follow us on social media, and let's make sure that we are all supporting local soccer and help this sport grow. I got here, two amazing people that have been involved with the soccer, just like myself, for many, many years, or for basically for all of our lives. I will not do a full introduction of both of you. Otherwise, we're going to stay here for a full hour just making the introduction of what you guys did. But I would like to start with you, Glenn, a person that I can call a friend at this point. Glenn is a national recognized TV and radio commentator, has called World Cups. It's currently the play-by-play man for the Houston Dynamo and was a former professional soccer player also. He also hosts the Austin Soccer Matters show at the Horn Network, the ESPN here in Austin, and so many other things. Glenn, welcome to the panel. If I forgot about something that you did, again, that's very important. Please tell me, my friend.
Shameless promotion, Roberto. Thanks for having me on. This is a great thing you're doing with the Striker in Texas. I've been following you, and I am a subscriber.
I appreciate that. We cannot do what we're doing without that. Between myself and Glenn here, we got, Alexi Lalas, what to say, played a World Cup. I grew up, was my reference. I grew up in Brazil, and Alexi was my reference for U.S. soccer growing up. It's been amazing. Played in Italy, in Ecuador. I think between working and playing, I think you played in basically every MLS team in this country, Alexi. And today you are, the analyst, the soccer analyst on Fox Sports. So much fun to see you on TV, keeping all that energy up. Welcome, and thanks for doing this, Alexi.
No, thank you. It's an absolute pleasure. I echo Glenn. The stuff that you're doing is wonderful for the game, whether you're kicking a ball or talking about soccer. It's there's men and women like you all across the country that are promoting it and doing things that are good to, push that boulder up the hill.
All right. Thank you very much. So we're here to talk today on maybe not such a easy topic, and hopefully, I think with the experience that the three of us had, both on the field, on the managing side of teams, and on the communication side, which all three of us had all of those experiences overall. We're here to discuss a little bit how the media covers soccer in the United States, right? Is the media too soft? Has the soccer evolved over the last 30 years in the States? And has the media, the mainstream media and the niche media like we are, have evolved as much as the sport overall? And the other side also, has the clubs and the teams, do they really care about the media? Do they really care about the fans' opinions overall? And I think that's what I want to explore here with you guys today a little bit. So just to kick off this whole thing, Alexi, do you think the media is too soft?
It depends. I think that the realities of the media in the United States in 2022 could certainly make it seem like it's too soft. I mean, look, when we're still not the sport when it comes to our country and culture, especially when it comes to our history. We have, for many years and decades now, had to find alternative platforms in order to talk about the game. And, it started back with fanzines, and then it's, big soccer and boards and all those things, and then going into websites and blogs, and now with social media, we always seem to find a way to talk about the sport that we love. And so that criticism and that debate that goes on normally with other sports and has for many years, it just hasn't had that, not just that platform, but that amplification. That's a long way of saying I don't necessarily think that we aren't critical enough. I just don't think that we have enough people being heard to equal and to put it in a parallel to other sports. And that's interesting because people like myself and people like Glenn, in a certain way, we benefit from the lack of clutter. And so when we do end up saying something, it cuts through more often than not because there's not as many, certainly with those platforms and with those bullhorns that so many people seem to have in other sports. It is changing, though.
Glenn, what's your opinion, my friend?
Yeah, I would just add to that, to Alexi's point, that the context of the sport in this country. I mean, we're not like the rest of the world in that we've got a tremendous amount of competition. As Alexi said, pushing the boulder up the hill. So you do have to find these alternative sources. If you're looking at mainstream media and the way games are covered, yeah, I mean, a lot of times it's just the regurgitation of press releases and cheerleading to get really, and this is the word that I go to, healthy pressure, because we all need it. The clubs need it, the players need it, the coaches need it. Is it too soft in a press conference after a game? I would say absolutely in most cases. Now, certain markets it may be a little bit different, but I would say it is. But I also think we have to look at it in the context of where we are, 3 other traditional sports, lifestyle. This is a very complicated world right now to try and cut through all this stuff. And that's why I think as the future continues and we continue to see a lot of young people emerging and becoming voices for the sport on their platforms, along with, the elder statesmen like me, and I wouldn't say Alexi, but Alexi's lens and my lens are a little bit different than somebody who's younger. So we're at a point now where it's not as hard for us to respectfully be critical when it comes to talking to a coach or something. Maybe not as easy for the younger burgeoning sort of journalist and person that's involved in the game.
And because there's not that many people, and I think we all on the same. I think we're in agreement overall on the concept that there's not too many critical people on the media side today, just because of like we said, the mainstream media has this whole thing of football, basketball, baseball, and we lack maybe more Glens and more Alexis out there, like you said. The fact that we have not that many of those, does that also make the clubs or the players or the coaches soft because they're not used to get that criticism so with such a frequency? Alexi.
I mean, look, I think that both Glenn and I have probably had experiences at times where we say something and we know that call's coming because they're monitoring everything, and because, like you said, there's so few, it tends to be amplified and it tends to strike much more so than others, and that's okay. We deal with those calls, whether it's the United States Soccer Federation and it could be something as simple and as innocuous as a tweet or something else that gets under their skin. And like I said, you get that call. I will say that when it comes to criticism, right? We tend to equate criticism with credibility, and we see it happen around the world in different other cultures where people are screaming and yelling, and some of it is real and true and authentic, and a lot of it is theatrical in the way that it goes about. But I would just caution that just because somebody is critical, just being critical to be critical, does not mean that you are credible, or that it is valid necessarily in terms of your criticism. And I know we as Americans sometimes are so insecure about what our soccer is, and more importantly, what our soccer isn't, that we're dying to be those other cultures, and so sometimes we manufacture ways to be like them. And again, just being critical to be critical doesn't mean that you as an individual are credible, and it doesn't mean that as a soccer playing culture and nation that we have necessarily evolved and that we are now credible just because we have criticism out there.
Yeah, I had several discussions over this past year with the teams here in Texas, right? Especially here in Texas over the last, if it was not Glenn covering soccer the way he does. I don't think we could even say that we had any coverage of soccer in Texas before, besides Glenn. I think he's really the big one that has been following that. But I had a lot of those discussions where the teams would say, "Oh, I'm going to be critical of you no matter what. I want my reporters to be critical. They have to be fair. If you do something well, we're going to say something good. If you do something bad, we're going to say something bad, and you have to accept that. Don't be upset with that, right?" Glenn, we talked a little bit about a specific point that happened last year, which maybe I got a little bit more upset than I should, but it was the Josh Wolf BS question that happened last year. I don't know, Alexi, if you followed that, but as everybody knows, Austin FC was doing a very bad year on the field. Amazing franchise outside the field, but inside the four lines, it was very disappointing, at least. And in the middle of the season, there was a specific game that the team gave up in the second half. It was clear that, we all know that happens. And a local reporter here in Austin made a question to Josh Wolf at the end of the press conference and said, "Hey, did you feel that your players gave up on you and gave up on the game after?" And he goes and he says, "Oh, this is a BS question," with the full words, not just the BS part of it. And everybody accepted that. I was telling my team, I said, "Don't accept that. If that happens to you, I want you to go hard on him because it's part of our criticism." And by the way, it was not a BS question. Glenn, how do you feel about that?
No, it's not a BS question. Look, I think there's a couple things you have to consider here. First, Josh, first-year coach, you're losing a lot of games. You got a packed stadium. There's a tremendous amount of pressure on him. These kind of guys that have put themselves out there, like Josh Wolf, and have done the work to get to where they are, I'm always rooting and pulling for them. But it is not a BS question. And I think as the future grows, the healthy pressure grows, Josh can easily turn that question into a positive, right? Easily can turn it into a positive. But they're human. They have emotion too. And a little bit of emotion can be a good thing. Some might say that was good press. Alexi's a master at a time period where nobody gave a damn about soccer, about trying to dangle the bait and get people involved. And this is a skill that he has. So is it a BS question? Absolutely, absolutely not. And I watched that game and they did quit. Okay. So then you can ask, okay, why did they quit if you can get to the next level? But there was no follow-up, I don't think. So look, yeah, do some of the coaches take it a little bit personal? Of course. But I do think human emotion is part of it. I think we have to be careful with social media and things. We have to be responsible. We have to be respectful in the way we ask questions, but they can be strong and they can be firm. And
they should be, right, Glenn?
Yeah, and you just can't, but you also just can't come out there and just say, "Hey, so-and-so's crap," okay? Or assassinate somebody's character. If somebody had a poor game as a winger, then you tell us why and how he had a poor game. But, there's a lot of generalizations. There's a lot of not quantifying just these big, bold statements that people want to get a rise out of. But I know the incident you're talking about. I'm sure Josh Wolf is going to learn from that. And as the press and everybody gets more educated, you're going to get more educated questions. And we're going to start talking we're going to move the needle a little bit more towards the nuances of the game, the tactics, because that is also something people are very interested in. And the way coaches respond to those types of questions.
I fully agree with you, Glenn. Alexi, you talked about those calls that you might receive after a comment or whatever, right? And I think one of the challenges that the media overall, anywhere, not just here, but I think here a little bit more, because again, I'm in the opinion, and we can discuss that in a little bit, that the clubs or the players or the staff here in the U.S. care less about the media, or they're less concerned about what the media says than other places, right? You go to South America, a article can take down the whole team, can take down the president all the way down to the forward which again, I don't think it's the right model, but we can discuss that a little bit. But my question to you is, a challenge that we have here in the US is how can we keep that relationship going? Because the media depends a lot on that connection, on that relationship with the people behind those positions, and at the same time be critical. How do you deal with that?
I mean, this is human beings, right? And Glenn will be the first person to tell you that relationship is fostered over time, and it's based hopefully on mutual respect. And by the way, that doesn't mean that at times you can't very publicly be going back and forth at each other. But I think there has to be, like I said, that mutual respect and the understanding that, in my case, I'm there to do a job. And part of my job is to understand and question the things that I see. And if you have a valid explanation as to the things, that's completely fair. But for example, the Josh Wolf situation again, if it bleeds, it leads. We all understand that. That's a truism that has existed in entertainment for many, many years. You're wanting, in this day and age, we're wanting to get clicks, and there is an element of gotcha in everything that we do, because we are humans, whether we want to admit it or not. You know exactly what you're doing when you ask a question that is going to be interpreted in a certain way, and if it's done. If it's done with a level of cleverness, you do get that answer that you want, either in the form of an answer that actually addresses that provocative question, or in the form of a confrontational type of moment that we all know can go viral, that we all know can sometimes be more impactful than just the we played well and we're taking it one game at a time type of answers that we all know just go up in the ether and nobody ever listens to anyway. But this is all about the growth of the sport. We understand that whether it's coaches, whether it's front office people, in many cases, they haven't necessarily lived day in and day out in a country and culture where you're constantly being slammed. And I would argue that in many of those countries and cultures, it just becomes white noise. And so that's why it's sometimes easier for them to ignore it, because there's just so much of it. They can't possibly deal with each and every one, as opposed to the U.S. This also applies, by the way, to players and the criticism that they get. I argue that this new generation of player, we've given every advantage to, all the opportunities when it comes to developing great resources, great coaching, pathways to Europe, all of those different things. But with that comes higher expectations, and with that, by the way, is going to come more criticism. Nobody yells about the attention and the criticism that a phenom like, I don't know, when Messi came over or when Neymar came over. Nobody yells at the fact that people were sitting there with their arms crossed saying, all right, perform. Well, that's what you do if at a young age, if you are being holistic in the way that you are developing players. Part of that is the ability to withstand that type of criticism and understand that is going to come. It's going to come day in and day out. And you have to find a way to either internalize it or you have to find a way to completely block it out. Not always easy, but I don't think that it's wrong for us to expect, whether it's players, coaches, front office people, or even within the media between ourselves, the ability to withstand and to at least try in a civil and respectful way to understand that people are doing their jobs. The best people are the ones that can give you back something that ultimately makes them look good in this situation and turn it around on you. And those are the ones that I ultimately respect.
Perfect.
So this morning I had a conversation with a friend of mine, Roberto, in Barcelona, and he was telling me about how certain groups can get into press conferences, certain outliers can't. A lot of it's controlled and managed, and a lot of it's controlled and managed here. Look at MLS. It was a marketing machine and still is a marketing machine. And the clubs have, in a lot of ways, best practices that are followed. I think we're starting to see some of the clubs become a little bit more very creative in their own markets with their own challenges. But look, I'm going to give you an example here, and this is not throwing anybody under the bus, but let's just take the Houston Dynamo, who have been really poor for a lot of years now and have a big hole to dig out of. They have a new owner in Ted Siegel. They got new staff, Pat Onstad, and a bunch of guys that deserve a tremendous opportunity to turn this thing around, right? but this is Houston, Texas, 7 or 8 million people. We have labored in mediocrity and under the radar for so many years. And I've always said to myself, wow, if we had a seriously engaged media that did more than regurgitate press releases and say everything's orange and beautiful, could this have been turned around earlier? Could this have shamed in a healthy way an owner to have changed things earlier and not be as deep down now to try and get out of it, right? And I think that in markets like the one that I'm in, and I think there's others in this league, that it's up to the organization to nurture healthy pressure. You don't think Paulo Nagamura here wants healthy pressure? You don't think the players want it? You want to run out in an empty stadium, or do you want the pressure of people judging you? You're an entertainer. So I also think because of where we are evolutionary in the process, and we're growing, no question, but I also think the front offices have to figure out in certain markets how they can reach out to the community and nurture more real healthy pressure and soccer talk as opposed to, hey, I just want to get my message out. Because I'll tell you what, that doesn't work.
Glenn, that was actually my next question, and you already answered, I think, 90% of that, which was, how can teams captivate the mainstream media, right? It's easy for the teams to get my attention. I'm a soccer specific. Everything that we do and talk is about them. It's easy. But how can we, how can the clubs bring that attention a little bit better from the mainstream media? We had a panel last year that we had people from the editors from the mainstream media, and they said, well, we have limited real estate here competing with football, with basketball and baseball and everything. You're never going to have the coverage on the mainstream media the way you guys want from us. But I still think that we can do much more for that. What can the clubs do that? And I'll leave for both of you to comment that.
Well, I'll just really quickly, and then I'll turn it over to Alexi. You got to establish relationships with networks, right? So my idea is just this little guy, Glenn Davis, was, I'm going to infiltrate the system. I'm going to kind of be a spy. I started on public radio. Alexi's been in my studio. We had a fun time one time when we were down here doing a national team game. We had Taylor in there, Mark Connolly, all these guys, Zopp, and we went over to the station. But they are recognizing now that there are listeners, viewers, and readers that want to learn about this sport. But we also need people who are sort of the detonators and that can get in there. We're hoping that the change in upper management and leadership, and I don't think this has happened fast enough, are people that ultimately are going to get these jobs that have grown up with and are passionate about soccer. We get a few more of those in there. For instance, I'm not a writer. I wrote for the Houston Chronicle for 7 years. And this all occurred because the guy at the newspaper who was the editor said, wow, we have to tap into this potential, because they probably saw a few games with Mexico and 70,000 people. Well, these are all potential readers and listeners. We have to pay attention to this. So I get a column, right? And I noticed that there is a lot more respect. It's not an easy fix because mainstream media, as you said, is bundled up with traditional sports. These guys on local news have 30 seconds to talk about soccer. What more can they do than come out and say, hey, it's opening day 2022, Dynamo getting ready, run a little footage, that's it. This is from a local perspective. So I think you can win people over, and I don't think it's easy, but it's not happening fast enough. It's not turning over and accelerating fast enough, but I really think it's on us. They are not going to come to you. You have to go to them. You have to figure out ways. You have to expose them to environments. Hell, I'd stick a few people on a plane and take them down to a U.S.-Mexico game in Azteca, see if I can change their minds. I think you just have to come up with really creative ideas at this point.
Alexi, you are... yes, please. No, please, go.
I just wanted to say, to Glenn's point, it actually goes back to something he said in the previous question about personality. So when you get those moments, because we all know the metrics are there and they know what what sells and what doesn't, and there's limited space. We all understand that. But if and when you infiltrate, if and when you get those opportunities, you better be damn sure that you have something to give them, something that resonates, something that cuts through, something that transcends just here's a typical interview with a player, something like that. And I don't think we do enough of encouraging our players to be themselves. I'm not asking them necessarily to be something that they can't be or don't want to be or something different, but to really bring out those personalities. When I'm watching a sport that I know nothing about, the actual sport in and of itself, all right, that's great. It happens, whatever. But really what draws me in and makes me pay attention is the people behind it. When they give, a really good interview, when they're, when they're emotional or when they're funny or when they're, incredibly, let's be honest, when they're just articulate, it sets them apart from a lot of athletes out there that when they get that microphone in their face, they either don't have the ability to talk, they freeze up, or they're just boring. And again, you can work on that. And so the preparation that needs to be done, and it starts at a young age of recognizing that, hey, your job is not just in that 90 minutes of the game. Your job is outside it. And by the way, because kids even today love to talk about their brand and they want to be famous and they want to make a lot of money and stuff like that. If you want to cultivate that, then this is a skill and a tool that you better have in your bag going forward because it can really help you. Believe me, I know from experience how much it can help you. And so then when you get those opportunities like Glenn is talking about, don't waste them and have people leave that segment, whether it's 30 seconds, whether it's 2 minutes, saying, hey, that is something cool. I really enjoyed those people. Maybe, it's the environment that you're in. Now with the fan base that we have and this fan culture, this supporters culture that's out there, I think that's really something to lean into because that's experiential, right? That is something that people, whether they know about a back four or a back three or offside or anything like that, people like to go and have a good time and drink and sing and be part of that communal type of aspect that I think is really unique to soccer. All of those things I think can be sold, but it goes back to our boulder, right? We're pushing it up this hill. It's gotten easier, but it's certainly not easy, and we still got a long way to go, but we can't afford to waste opportunities. Whether it's a huge opportunity like not going to the World Cup in 2018, the Men's World Cup, or whether it's just a small opportunity where you have a segment on the the morning show of your local of your local TV station. You better be ready, and you better be able to bring it. And even if it's just 2 or 3 people that turn their head, that's how it happens, day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year.
Some of my best promotion of the sport, Roberto, has come in coffee shops, talking to people about the game when you're just there to get a cup of coffee and somebody comes up. Next thing you know, you get their number, you bring them to the game, you get them tickets. And I think Alexi's point is phenomenal because the players have to take the initiative in this. And I think front offices have to say and coach these players a little bit more to say that, look, if I get a minute of airtime, it's a minute of airtime that has to be positive. I have to be ebullient. I have to be gregarious. I have to be up. I have to be positive. And this is a part of your job. And I don't think they get coached enough on it. I think PR people have to be very, very concerned. And believe me, I'm not telling people how to do their job here. But don't give me the 19-year-old kid that's a mute. Because when he says nothing and he hasn't been coached and he doesn't have a personality, you have wasted 30 seconds of very, very valuable time. Very, very valuable time. So I think there's a lot of coaching that needs to occur. I think the front offices have to take responsibility. If you're a coach in a market where you got nobody coming to your games, every single time you get that position, and you get in front of a microphone, you got to be selling your team, your messaging, your tactics, whatever it is. Now, I understand there are coaches who are just, I don't want anything to do with that. Well, I'll tell you what, if I'm in a market and I'm not drawn and I got no relevancy and you can't do that part of the business for me, I may not hire you, frankly. I may not hire you. And if I'm going to close practices and make it difficult for everybody, then you're hurting yourself.
To our point on the beginning of the panel, I personally think that, like I said, the front offices don't care. I think they should be caring about the media much more. I think the fact that over the past 30 years, they had to create their own channels, right? So today, if you want to know about MLS soccer, the place that you go, let's even say here in Texas, before the Striker Texas, you would go to MLSsoccer.com, or you would go to the website of the clubs itself, right? So they created their own media, and that allows them to sometimes not care about the overall media and think that they don't need that. Do I have the right impression on that? Especially you, Alexi, that
It's
you've
a little
been.
homogenized, don't you think, Alexi? It gets a little homogenized and seems a little bit contrived. We need a little less contrived. We need some people outside the box, you know?
Yeah, but it's limiting. I mean, let's be honest. When it comes to, for example, when we're talking about television numbers, right? We know pretty much where the numbers are right now, and we want them to be more. And so we know the people that are already in the tent. They're already converted. Okay, they're what we want, but we want to get more people in. And so if all you're doing is focusing on the people that are already there, in any business, you're not going to grow. And if you're not growing, you have a problem, especially when you're competing against other sports. So it behooves, whether it's MLS or any other business out there, yeah, you can just have your tent, but getting that tent bigger, and more importantly, bringing more people into the tent, the way that you do that is by going outside and going to different areas and different venues and different platforms to bring those people. Ours, for example, Major League Soccer. Major League Soccer's problem isn't that there aren't soccer fans in the United States. It's that there's not enough MLS fans. And so that's what they have to work on. And they have to go get those people that don't necessarily look at soccer from a particular standpoint, and they might watch EPL or something like that. You got to be able to convert them. And then once you get them, you go to the other sports and you say, hey, this is something that you should be involved with. But if we just sit around and talk amongst ourselves, which is what you're talking about with some of the traditional platforms that we have that were created out of necessity, but were created and now just serve the limited type of tent that we have right there, we're never going to grow.
And the redundancy sometimes, the redundancy and the consistency of playing to the same group of people is I mean, it's almost mind-boggling sometimes. We're not the NFL, we're not the NBA. Let's find out our differences and why we're different. We're global. We're more diverse than all these sports. Let's focus on that. Let's not try to be the NBA. Let's not try to be the NFL. Let's take good things from those great leagues and worldly leagues, but let's find our own sort of creativity and our own fulcrum for our own original ideas. We just repeat the process. It's stunning to me sometimes how it's almost like hitting your head on the wall that we continue to go to the same groups. So we have this great young base now. That's really important. Craft cocktails, celebrating a city, social things, all this. This is fantastic. This is wonderful. Don't stop there, though, because you need loyalists also. Houston, Texas is, and I'm using my city as an example, is full of soccer people from around the world. Let's do things to encourage them to come. And we got a community of 50, 60,000 Nigerians. Why aren't they at the game? They're the most fun group of fans, as fun as any you could find. Why aren't there Nigerian flags down there and people dancing in the aisles with colorful outfits on? I mean, it's a party. It's fun. Let's reach out. And I think sometimes if you don't have the passionate soccer background, it's hard for you to get into those areas. So guess what? As an organization, we're just going to go to best practices. And best practices can be boring. So I think there's a lot of room to improve, to be creative. And I also think there's a lot of good creative things going on in places like Austin. But if I'm Austin, I'm working harder with my stadium packed to continue to build huge relationships with the media. I don't rest on my laurels now because we got a full stadium and we're killing it off the field.
We talked a lot about the clubs itself, what they can do. Alexi, you're a lot on Tiglen, you're a lot on radio, and we are print, although we're online, right? What can we do better than we're doing now? Is there anything that us and our peers could be doing to work what we just talked over the last 10 minutes now?
Oh man, I mean, look, if I had that answer, then it would be ezy, and we would be able to do it. And it's not something that happens overnight. It's something that takes a long time of chipping away. Use whatever metaphor you want, chipping away, pushing the boulder, all that kind of stuff. But it's it's a labor, but I think for a lot of us, it's a labor of love, right? And now I think there's an opportunity to find unique and different stories out there that are percolating. We have so many different soccer markets out there. Some of them that either were soccer markets a long time ago and are coming back, or some of them we never even thought. I mean, it's going to be amazing in 2026 when the Men's World Cup comes back to the U.S. to look at it relative to, for example, the '94 World Cup and what a soccer market is in the United States. And so, covering your soccer market locally, or whether covering your country and the soccer markets that exist, you got to be in it, and you have to have your finger on the pulse of what is happening and what is not happening. There is incredible power and leverage now that the fan bases have and these soccer communities have. You have one end of it where it's the grassroots. You have the other end of it where it's the high elite type of thing. In between, you have player development and all the different stories, good, bad, and everything in between that are happening. And it's not easy for sometimes one person to cover all of that. And so you have to kind of be very selective as to what you think is going to resonate. And as we know, it's still a business. And so you have to find out, while this might be a story that's personal and close to you, it might not click, and it might not be something that other people are going to see. And so you have to have that balance of doing things that excite you and motivate you, but also with the business on the other side, and what's going to speak to the most people out there so that I can get to the most people in the shortest period of time possible.
Glenn, anything on this?
Yeah. Go ahead, Roberto. Sorry.
No, anything on this? Do you want to say anything?
No, I was just gonna, and I agree with everything here that's being said. And look, personally, you're constantly trying to get better at your craft and better at what you do. You're trying to be a better interviewer. You're thinking of your audience, and this is from a personal standpoint of what I do on radio and TV, differing storylines and the things that you think can make you better at what you're doing. Now, one thing that bothers me is I think we speak in a lot of generalizations these days, without really quantifying some of the things that we toss out there. So for instance, I'll give you for instance. It's in a press conference. This was an NWSL related press conference. It's a new executive at a team that's a president. Okay. And the line of questioning, what kind of dog do you have? I mean, maybe that's good. That's a good line of questioning. I don't know. I'm sitting there going, okay, I want somebody to ask a real question about the women's game. How can we, to this person, how can we make this a spectator sport? Because it doesn't have a history of being a spectator sport in team sports, except for certain markets, right? Or except for the national team. How do we make it a spectator sport? Why are all these women that have played the game at the youth level, spent countless hours out there with their parents, have played in college, have gone on to be parents, and are doing incredible stuff in their careers? Why are they preferring to watch men's soccer than women's soccer? I mean, these are the kind of questions that we have to ask the high-end executives that are running these teams.
But would you be getting a call on the next day? Would you be getting a call the next day, like Alexi said, if you do those hard questions?
I hope not, and if I did, that's fine. I'll talk to anybody about that, because you're not getting the attendance you want. You want the sport to grow more. We are seeing CBAs and things improving on the women's side. We had a monumental thing occur today with the national team.
Yes.
But and this is strictly an example. So that's all I'm saying. The follow-up question. Where is that? A lot of times we'll ask a question. There's an obvious second question, but because we're not listening and we're worrying about the next question we want to ask, we blow it. I mean, we see it all the time. I'm guilty of it. I'm trying to improve myself when it comes to that, be a better listener, so that when I ask an interviewee a question, and Bob Bradley says something back, before I jump to whatever's next in my line, I'm listening carefully to him. And if he gives me a better second question, I have to ask that, right? Can't let him get away with just a generalization, right?
Agree.
Quantify that. We played better in the second half. Well, why did you play better? How? Tell us what.
Why did you change?
Things.
Right? Yeah. So we're about to get to our last 10 minutes here in our panel, but I want to bring the discussion that's I like the way we're going very broad, but I want to come to a very specific one just because I got two communication geniuses here and very experienced. But there's a discussion that we have with our team here sometimes, which is a very specific one about the difference in the United States sports overall, not just soccer, with other countries, which is trying to create that scoop, right? That special relationship that we talked about a while ago. One thing that's very common here in the United States is for the reporters or the media have some access to the locker rooms, which if you go to South America or other countries, that doesn't exist. The locker room is a place for the teams, for the players, right? And when I talk to many of my reporters or even some other people from other places in the U.S., they say this should happen. We should have access to the locker room. Where you guys stand on that? I'll start with you, Alexi.
Yeah, I think the locker room, I mean, obviously I grew up in this type of culture where we didn't think twice about it. They're there, we talk to them, they're part of it in the locker room. And when you do that, and when you grow up within a country and culture where that is the norm, that becomes the expectation. And I don't know, and I haven't talked to enough people to know if it really makes that big a difference. When you're talking about scoops and information, breaking news, you have to be a special type of person to be involved in breaking news. And let's be honest, the moment of excitement that one would get from breaking a story, it's become very, very limited in this day and age because, back in the day, you would break a story, it would come out in a newspaper, it would live for at least the next 24 hours, maybe more than that. Here, you're talking about 13 seconds sometimes. Well, this person tweeted it first or whatever. And so it's ultimately going to be out there. And I think you're having diminishing returns. I'm not saying that there isn't a place for that. I'm not saying that the people that do that aren't useful and at times incredible in the jobs that they do. Where that comes from, it could come from the locker room. It could come, as Glenn has talked about, the relationships that you have, and oftentimes that's really where it does come from. It also comes from a quid pro quo type of situation where you're being used, and it's okay you're being used because they want to get information out and they want to find a way to be able to do that. But that exists in any type of newsroom and news story. I like I recognize that it is sacred, the locker room around the world. I like the fact that people have access to the locker room here. It's what we do. I think sometimes we apologize so much for what we are, and it's okay. We're taking the best parts that exist around the world, and we are definitely using those, but we're also going to be uniquely American in the way that we play the sport on the field, in the way that we watch the sport around the field, and in the way that we cover the sport around the field.
Glenn.
Obviously I didn't play on the national team like Alexi did, but I played in leagues like the ASL. I played here in Houston in a thing that was called the USL, which is actually where the current USL got the name. And we had one reporter that would come out, and he was actually a NASCAR and a car racing guy. And you could tell he just wanted to get a quote or two and get the hell out of there, right? And we'd have guys lining up because they wanted to be quoted in the Houston Post, So guys would move over towards them, and and it's changed. And listen, I get the sanctity of the locker room. I love that part of the sport. I understand why coaches want to, in some ways, keep this concentric circle and not let a lot of people in. But it's a totally different day and age. I think this access, certainly it has to be controlled. Certainly it has to be respectful. But in a lot of ways, you got to give it, especially, again, if you're not thriving, you got to give it. And on the other hand, I'd say, and if you are thriving, don't ruin that relationship. Don't all of a sudden become, we're going to push you away. The more you can bring people in, the more the relationships build, the better the coverage, the growth in the education of the person now that is, from a soccer perspective, covering the game. There's the entertainment people, there's the ones who want to talk more nuances. We need it all. And I look at some of the writers, the the people that are writing and the people that are commenting. There's tremendous talent out there. But it still has to get better, and that includes myself and Alexi and everybody else that's involved in this game.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. There's something that you said, Alexi, that it's like, it's what we grow up with. I think that changes a lot, right? What we accept. I grew up not accepting the media, and that's something that I went into some of these discussions, and I was the GM here for the USL for the Austin Aztecs and the Austin Bold. I didn't even consider allowing, a reporter going to the locker room. My mind, I grew up saying this is totally off limits. And it's interesting to see that you as a player and both of you as a player understand that that's acceptable. And again, I think that goes back to the whole discussion that we had in this panel is I think we have to create more experiences on both ends, on the media being stronger, the teams in the clubs being more acceptable, and understanding, like you said, what is our culture and what's best out there. Let's bring all those things together and create something special here in the U.S., which I think we have the chance to do that. Once again, I can't thank you both enough for being here. Before we finish, Alexi, any final words that you would like to give to our audience here in Texas for this second year of the Texas Soccer Summit?
Well, no, I mean, first off, thank you, Roberto, for having me on, and I wish you luck going forward. You are doing, as we said at the beginning of the talk, important things, and it's always a pleasure to be on with Glenn. And I think he's mentioned a couple of times about the fact that we're still learning and we're still growing and we're still evolving and we're still making mistakes. And I can certainly get better. Glenn can get better. I've watched Glenn over the years and everything that he has done. And, especially when it comes to specific markets, and obviously he's, forever kind of associated with Houston, you got to have champions and you have to have people leading the charge. All right. But those champions, they need help. They can't do it all. They can't do it all alone, even though sometimes they have been doing it all alone for a long time. And so you tip your hat to them. You thank them to the extent that you can help them do that, because that's the only way that this grows. And whether it's doing something like this, what we're doing today, or whether it's just the day in and day out blocking and tackling, soccer has grown so much, and we love to talk about how much we have grown, and it has. We still got a long way to go, but it doesn't continue without people putting their heart and soul into it. And whether it's you, Roberto, whether it's you, Glenn, you've put your heart and soul into it, and it has made a difference that you can see, and for many things that you can't necessarily see or we won't see until the future.
I appreciate your words.
Yeah,
Glenn.
Yeah, those are great words from Alexi. There's not a lot really for me to add there, except to say, Roberto, it's been great getting to know you, and to see a project like this. I mean, a lot of people would say, it was kind of like playing soccer professionally in the 80s. There was never even the discussion of infrastructure in a stadium built specifically for soccer. Well, now to see you taking this to a larger level in Texas and then potentially more, I mean, these are the idea makers. These are the people, as Alexi said, that are the purveyors in their community of growing the game. I mean, look, I think both Alexi and I would say we hope we've in a positive way maybe influenced somebody to get into soccer journalism, right? I mean, this is the way it works. You pay it forward. So I can just successfully say that I love every minute, pretty much almost every minute, but except when the guy called me a Botoxed out looking lizard, I've enjoyed every minute of my career in the media. And my answer was, and this is why media is great, my answer was, guess what? You're part right. I do look like a lizard, but I don't do Botox. Anyway, we have to.
I love it. Again,
it's all good.
Again, I can't thank you guys enough. I agree with both of you. I think this kind of conversations and not being afraid of talking about the challenges that we have, that's what's going to make us really improve. And I'll leave it as that. But I do think that we can. There's a lot of space for improvement, and I agree with both of you. We keep going today with the Texas Soccer Summit. The next panel we have, starting on the hour here, is will USL's new league help inspire the next generation of women's player. We got Laura Gomez, we got Katie Goodman, we got commissioner for the USL League, Amanda Vandervoort, and Elisa Vicuna. So that's going to be in the hour now. Again, this is the Texas Soccer Summit brought to you by the Striker Texas. We can't do this if you don't support us. You subscribe to us, support the Striker Texas, and we'll bring the best coverage that there is for the sport that we love in the state that we call home. So thank you very much, Alexi. Thank you, Glenn. And stay with us. Support local soccer.
Thanks, Roberto.